Hello, I'm Iona Walters, a Senior Solutions Consultant with Adobe, and I'd like to thank you for joining me today for this Edge Animation tutorial. Now, I know many of you out there have been using Edge Animate for some time now, perhaps even in its pre-release form. But we also have a lot of new users joining us every single day, so welcome to you all, and I hope there's something useful for everybody in this session. I'm going to show you some ways to use symbols within your animations and also within other symbols to keep your compositions flexible and lightweight and to enable you to work easily with triggers and interactions. I've built a very simple game to demonstrate this, so let's first of all take a look at the assets I've created within Photoshop. So here you can see I've got some 3D elements which I've actually created from flat images of the Edge Animate icons. I've added some deformation to these, so that gives them this kind of balloon effect and this 3D feel. And I've also added some rotation to them. And what I'm going to do is actually cycle through these different rotated elements to give the impression in Edge Animate that the item's rotating within the frame. You can't, of course, work with 3D elements within Edge Animate, so we have to kind of fake it using these images. I've also created some cloud icons, which you can see here, and again, these have just got some deformation added to them, that ballooning effect. And once I've got all of these images as I'd like them, I'm going to get Photoshop to generate these images for me using the brand new Generator plugin. So all I need to do is enable the plugin, so let's do that. And then, because I've labelled all of these layers very carefully with a .png after the name of them, once I kick the generator engine off, I just say File, Generate, Image Assets. It's going to automatically make all of these images for me, which is absolutely fantastic because it's going to save me so much time not having to go through the process of saying File, Save for Web, choosing the location, choosing the name, etc. So now if I open up Edge Animate, you'll see that I've loaded these assets onto the stage, and I've created some symbols to enable the icons to appear to be rotating 3D elements. Let's take a look at that in the browser. And let me show you how I created those animations. So I'm selecting the Edge Animate image assets, and I'm going to right-click on them and convert them into a symbol, and then name the symbol. Now what I'm going to do is actually jump into one of the other symbols that I've made already. So let's take a look at that. And I'm going to select the code that I've already put in there. Now if we have a look at it, all I've done is put in some keyframes to set the display for each layer to either be showing or not, one layer after another. And when it gets to the end of that animation, I've put a little bit of code snippet in there, which I just literally add from the snippets panel, play reverse. And I've also added a code snippet at the start of the timeline to tell it to play. So it's just going to loop backwards and forwards and give this rotating look. So let's select all of that, the keyframes and also the code along the top there. And we're just going to paste it into the new Edge Animate symbol that I've created. There we go. And it's done. Working with symbols enables me to have animations sitting within other animations and to be able to apply triggers and interactions and additional animation to those elements. And once I've created a symbol, such as this Edge Animate one here, I can now add some animations to that symbol. So for example, these 3D symbols have all now been animated to move into position and even have some easing applied to them. I've then converted each of those symbols into another symbol so I can work with them later. I've also selected all of these balloon symbols and converted them into, yes, you've guessed it, another symbol. And I've called this new underscore game, underscore symbol. Now this is going to be the kind of game selector. It's going to enable the user to click on the icon that they want to play that particular game. We'll come back to this later on and add the JavaScript code snippets. But while I'm in this symbol, I'm going to set the mouse to be a pointy finger so that the user knows it's a clickable element. I've also created a graduated fill rectangle to form the background of the animation. And in fact, I could animate this graduated fill as well in the same way that I could animate any of the properties of the rectangle just by adding in the keyframe and then cycling through the various different gradients that I want it to mix between. It probably makes sense for me to make that as a symbol as well. So now I've added the cloud icons, which are dropping into place with some bouncing and easing applied to them. I've turned the new game symbol off for now, just so you can see it nice and clearly. I'm going to convert these into another symbol and call it game_1. And if I now double click on this in the Elements panel, I can start editing it and building the game. If I browse now to the symbol section of the library panel, I can reuse the symbol that I created earlier, and this is the rotating animate balloon. So let's drag and drop it onto the stage. There we go, and rename it there. I'm going to add an _1 just so that I'm clear about which element it is I'm working with on my timeline. And I'm going to reduce it in size to about 50%. And I'm going to add a label at this point, which is AN1. I'm going to set the visibility to be on at this point, but off previous to this. I'm also going to add a label at the start of the timeline called game_start, as we're going to need to point to this later on. So now, with this symbol selected, I'm going to choose the motion path option, and I'm also going to set its starting position with a keyframe. And now if I set the finishing point with a keyframe, you'll see that I now get a line drawn between the start and the finish point, and I can click along this to add points at which I can edit the curve the same way that I would with a Bezier. So I've got my Bezier handles there to help bend and shape that curve. I also want it to face in the direction of movement, so I'm going to rotate it slightly at the starting point. There we go. And I'm going to tell it to auto-orientate. So this means it's going to follow the direction of the curve as it moves around automatically for me. I've repeated this process to create another version of the animation with some easing applied to them. So I've got two versions of this animation running one after the other, as you can see here. I've also added a code snippet at this point to tell it to play from AN1. This means that until something happens to interrupt it, this section of the timeline will keep looping. So let's take a look. There we go. But of course, we need to add some interactivity to the symbol in order to make it a game. So let's take a look at how to do that. The first thing I did was to set the mouse icon to a pointy finger, and you saw how I did that earlier. I've then chosen a trigger of mouse down from these options. And I've added the following code: symbol stop and symbol hide. I've added these from the code snippets panel on the right here. Very nice and easy to do. And the only thing to remember is to name the symbol as it's named at this particular instance. So this one is AN_balloon_rotate_1. And that's going to hide it. So the first thing that will happen when I click on it, the animation will stop, the icon will disappear. And then there's another code snippet that I've added in called getSymbol. Again, this is from the panel on the right. And this simply means that it's going to get the symbol named AN_score_symbol and play it from the point labeled score1. But first I want to quickly show you that I've created 4 more instances of this rotating edge animate icon symbol and animated them with the different label positions. So we have AN2 to AN5 along the timeline. I've repeated the steps that we've just been through, and I've changed the code that's within there appropriately. I also now need to set the trigger code within the new _game symbol so that when the Edge Animate icon symbol is clicked, game 1 is launched and it plays from the start. So I've added an action, mouse down, then, and you might want to take a note of this, get composition, get stage and play game_1. And on the stage itself, I've added a label called game_1. This is so I can have multiple games sitting on this same timeline, but only be visible when they're selected and triggered from the starting game panel. I then also added some code to the timeline at this point, as firstly we want it to stop at this position. We then want it to get the symbol game_1, and we want to play it from the point labeled game start. That's to ensure that it plays from the very beginning of that game 1 symbol, from the timeline that we labelled earlier. So let's take a look at these triggers and the score symbol in action. All I need to do is click on the Edge Animate icon to trigger the game to begin. And here we go, we've got the icon looping out from behind the clouds. You can see the animation speeds up, and this is because we've added some cubic easing to it. If I manage to click on that first one, the score symbol is going to be triggered to drop down the first score icon. And now let's try and catch the second one. There we go. So that's now going to drop down the second score element and set the animation 3 to play. There we go. So that's score number 3 and the fourth one. And down comes score number 5, and the well done text appears to signal the end of the game. And of course, now it takes us back to the original starting choose a game screen. And at this point, of course, we would then want to be able to select one of these other icons to play an additional game. Okay, so how was the score symbol made? Here it is sitting within game_1. And if we jump into it, you can see it's pretty simple. There's just 2 different still images dropping one after the other to form a score stack. There are labels along the top of the timeline, so we can specify as to which point it plays from, whether that's score number 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. As well as some code triggers which happen at the end of each drop of the image to tell the symbol to stop playing. And to start playing the game_1 symbol timeline from the next animation point, in this case AN2, here's the code. You might want to take a note of this code, as when you're dealing with triggering symbols from other symbols sat within each other, you have to specify the correct path to be followed to reach that particular animation that you're wanting to trigger. So here the code specifies to go to the composition, so the top level of the stage. It then says to get the symbol game_1 and to play it from the labeled point AN2. So the other thing that I've added in here is a little reset symbol. And you can see this is just another little fun 3D cloud icon that I've created in Photoshop. And it's got a little bit of a reflection here as well, which I've animated. So let me just jump into that symbol there. So let's just expand this timeline out a little bit and you can see what's going on here. There's some text which is going to appear. I've got the 3D logo itself. I've got the 3D logo shadow, and I've got the 3D logo reflection there. And I've just literally animated those to come up and then drop. The text layer, which is actually a web font, it's running from the Adobe Edge web font server. So you're welcome to use these. It's fully integrated within Adobe Edge. And you can just click on the Add Font tab here in order to add new fonts. Is not going to be visible until this point here. And then the point at which the icon drops again, you can see it's just going to bounce down, the text disappears. So that's all that's being animated there is the opacity. This 3D logo you can see is lifting up, and then it's just got a bit of a rotate on it as it bounces down. And I've got labels at the top here which say lift and drop. And again, I've just animated the reflection and the logo shadow in order to move with that icon. So that's just positioning and rotation that's put in there. So now if I take a look at this code here, this is going to say play at this point up until the drop point, and it's going to stop. So just take a note of these labels. We've got lift and drop. And this symbol here has got some interaction applied to it. And you can see here, the mouse over is going to play from the lift point. So when I hover over it with my mouse, it will lift up. And when the mouse comes out, it's going to play from the point drop. And when I click on it, I'll be taken back to the start of the animation to the Choose a Game screen. Let's just take a look at that in action. So there it is. When I hover my mouse over it, it lifts up, the animation plays and stops. The text hint appears, so I know what's in store for me when I click on it. I also know it's a clickable object because it's got the pointy finger. And if I take my mouse away from it, it drops down and does a nice little kind of bounce. So let's just click on that and you can see it takes me back to that Choose a Game screen there. To produce the final game, I duplicated the symbol game_1 from within the library panel to create different versions of this game. And it's just worth pointing out here that if you want to use symbols multiple times within your animation, but you don't need to make changes to those actual symbols themselves, you can drag and drop, as we saw earlier, the symbol from the libraries panel onto the stage to create a new instance of it. That way you don't have to make multiple versions of the same animation. The other great thing about that is if you wanted to make a change to a symbol and have it applied across the entire composition, you just need to do that once and it would automatically update all those other instances for you. So really good time-saving stuff. That, of course, in itself is another benefit of using symbols. If you did, in fact, want these changes to be reflected across your composition, you change it in one place with that particular symbol and all the others get updated. But if, as I've mentioned here, you want to create a symbol to then base something else on but make a bunch of changes to it, so for example, I need to make game 2, what you need to do is navigate to the library panel, to the symbols element, right-click on it in there, and duplicate it at that point before you drag it onto the stage. That means that any changes that you make will be independent of the original one that you made the duplication of. So really, really important to be clear about that. You don't want to make some changes to a symbol and find it's updated somewhere else in your composition that you don't want it to do. So let's take a look at game 2 in action. We've just got 2 clouds this time, and we've of course got the edge code rotating symbol now, shooting out from behind the clouds and of course triggering that new edge code score symbol. So let's take a look at the code within game 2. This is the duplicated one, which I've renamed game 2. And because I've duplicated it from within this panel, no changes are going to be made to game 1, which is what we want. So now within here, we have the CO_balloon_rotate icon instead of the animate one, and this one again is called _1, and this has just been dragged and dropped onto the stage from the symbols panel within the library. I haven't had to duplicate it here, I've just literally dragged it onto the stage to make a new instance, and that's because I'm not making any changes to the symbol itself. It's just going to carry on rotating as it always has been. We can apply additional triggers to that with this actions button here, in the same way that we did with the Edge Animate icon. So here we've got a mouse down, and at this point the animation is going to stop, and this symbol, which is the one that we're selecting, is going to be hidden. So as soon as you click on it, it'll disappear, and then this symbol CO_score_symbol will play from the point score 1. So it's just a duplication of everything that's gone before. What I've done here, because I did need to change the animation score symbol from game 1, replace the images in it so that it would be the code version, I needed to come into the symbols panel here, browse to the AN_score symbol here, and I needed to duplicate it from this point. Once I duplicated it, I can drag it onto the stage, and if we jump into it, it's really then nice and simple to select each of these images, and then I can literally use this button here, change image source, so I can switch these to the edge code equivalent images. I don't need to do any additional things to these elements. I can literally replace the images in there, and then of course update the code here, because within here I want it to actually go to game 2 and play from animation 2. I need to change this throughout, so it gets the composition, gets the stage, gets the symbol, game 2, and plays it from the next point. So pretty straightforward stuff. I've produced new games for each of the icons that we see on this starting game screen. So we've got the Edge Inspect game. Let's take a quick look at that. And let's jump back to the Choose a Game screen. And we've got the Reflow game. There we go. And we've got the Edge Web Font game as well. So that's a little sneak peek at the game. I'll of course share the URL with you so that you can play the game later on. But I just wanted to give you an idea with this demo, the sorts of levels of interactivity that you can produce with some very, very simple code snippets and working cleverly with symbols within other symbols. So now all I need to do is export for web. So let's do that. And here's the code that it's produced. And of course, now I can FTP this up to an existing site or as a standalone site and share it with everybody to enjoy and play, as I'm sure you are desperate to do. So hopefully you've been able to see plenty of benefits for using symbols to be able to reuse elements that you've already worked with before, to help you add triggers and interactions, and also to help you manage your timeline. Because when you work with symbols, you'll find that things become a lot simpler and easier to navigate through and to work with. If you'd like to download a copy of the final Edge Animate project, I've uploaded one here. And if you'd like to play the game, I've published it via Business Catalyst, so you'll be able to access it from this URL. There are more presentations and tutorials on my website, which is creativesneaks.com, so do take a look at that. And if you'd like me to update you as to when I release and publish new material, then follow me on Twitter @CreativeSneaks. You can also connect with me on Facebook. That's facebook.com/creativesneak. And of course, do check out all of the videos and content available on the Adobe UK YouTube channel. And of course, we've also got the massive resource, which is Adobe TV. There are really loads of resources out there to help you learn and get the most out of your Creative Cloud products. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope to see you again soon.